This series, the inaugural lecture series, is about celebrating our newest professors and offering an excellent opportunity for them to share their research with a broad audience. And I'm delighted that it's Kostas' turn today to speak to you. Kostas completed his PhD studies with us in Lancaster in 2008, and after research and lecturing appointments in Europe, returned to Lancaster as a lecturer in 2014 and became Professor of Operations and Supply Chain Management in 2023. He's held visiting positions in many international organisations, and his current research focuses on public contracting and its role in promoting innovation, resilience and sustainability goals in supply chains. Kostas is one of the leading engaged scholars in the management school and works extensively with firms of all sizes and public sector bodies too. And his work has attracted external funding from UKRI and other organisations. He's an award-winning scholar and he publishes regularly in the leading journals in his field. So we're absolutely delighted to celebrate Kostas and his journey to Professor today and to hear his presentation entitled Contracting for the Common Good Towards Technology-Enabled, Resilient and Sustainable Supply Chains to Tackle Grand Societal Challenges. So I'll pass over to you now, Kostas.
Thank you, Maria, for the kind words, and thank you very much for the invite. And also, I would like to thank Sonia for organizing this event. It's an honor and a great pleasure to be here today and to be given the opportunity to talk about my research and how I made a professor in Lancaster. So let me share my screen.
Great, I can see that.
Just maximize. Okay, so can you see my screen?
Yep, we can see it.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. So first of all, thank you all for being here today. I wanted to make this as accessible as possible, so I decided to avoid going deep into technicalities and methodological matters and to rather focus on telling a story. But I would be happy to discuss the technicalities of my research later on if need be. So what I want to do in the next 45 minutes or so is to give you a flavor of my research, past and current research. As Maria already said, such research is engaged. They're largely problem-based, in particular seeking to help address the grand challenges that we are all facing as a society. So one of the grand challenges I have spent a lot of time and effort on is healthcare. The picture on the left side is from an NHS hospital in the northwest region, where clinicians worked with a technology-based SME called 3D Life Prints. This company focuses on developing 3D printing medical applications. Now, additive manufacturing has a lot of applications in healthcare, but this specific one is about using 3D printing to create precise replicas of a patient's heart based on a CT scan of their heart, which can then surgeon can use to make informed decisions about the operation in advance. And the benefits being that you have improved quality of the operation, saving operating time and cost, and thereby improving capacity utilization of operating theaters. So in this context, the key challenge is how best to integrate these SME-led novel technologies into the NHS supply chain so as to reap the benefits that I mentioned. Another problem I've been researching is shortages of medicines, which is a significant problem internationally. Like high-profile shortages of medicines recently include attention deficit drugs, antibiotics, and oncology drugs. So here the key challenge is how to make medicine supply chains more resilient in order to ensure the availability of essential medicines, especially generic drugs that the NHS heavily relies on. For your information, about 80% of the prescription drugs used in the NHS are generics. And these are the types of drugs that are more likely to feature shortages because of supply chain problems that they have. So such societal challenges are increasingly the target of public policies oriented towards specific missions. Like the current UK government has 5 missions, one of being NHS related. And obviously grant challenges are also closely linked to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which I believe most of you are familiar with. So within this broad public policy context, my research is primarily based on focusing on demand side policies with a particular focus on the role of public procurement. The UK government, for instance, spends every year about £400 billion in procurement contracts for goods and services, and this accounts for about 14% of the GDP, the GDP. So a puzzle that I've been concerned with is how to make use of this huge procurement spend strategically in order to promote innovation, resilience, and sustainability goals in supply chains, so as to tackle societal challenges, improve public services, while at the same time supporting the growth of SME firms. The underlying idea being here that the state also has a role to play in shaping markets and supply chains, as well as simply like fixing market failures. So this reflects the sort of Mariana Mazzucato's entrepreneurial state argument. So I will spend some time talking about how my work on procurement and supply chain management links to technological innovation, resilience, and sustainability in a bit. But first, please allow me to briefly introduce myself. So as Maria already said, I graduated, I did my PhD at Lancaster University and graduated in 2008. My doctoral thesis was co-awarded the Brian Kingsman Prize within Management Science for Best Doctoral Thesis of the Year. Previously, I also did a master's degree in operations management and what used to be UMIST in Manchester. My first degree was in economics with a specialization. I took the path of business administration after the third year. And I did my economics first degree in Aristoteles University of Thessaloniki in Greece. I've been a professor of operations and supply chain management since August 2023. Before that, I served as a senior lecturer in the Department of Management Science here at Lancaster. Before that, I was for 4 years working in Sweden in Lund University, first as a postdoc and subsequently as an assistant professor, as well as I did a fixed-term postdoc right after the end of my PhD at Stockholm School of Economics in 2008. Over the years, I've also held several visiting and invited positions, such as the ones that you can see in the slide here. So during my sabbatical year, I spent it in Fisher College of Business at Ohio State University, as well as at the Rotterdam School of Management of Erasmus University in the Netherlands. And more recently, I held an invited scholar position at the BI Norwegian Business School in Oslo. I have several external service roles. Some highlights here include the fact that since almost 2 years ago, I am an elected board member of the European Operations Management Association. I'm also serving as associate editor for 3 journals in our field, including the US-based Journal of Supply Chain Management. And I'm a reviewer for national and international research councils and funding bodies, UKRI, mostly ESRC, but I also have done reviews for the Medical Research Council. And I've been invited to do reviews for the US NSF in connection to innovation policy and innovation-oriented procurement, more specifically. Last month, I had the pleasure to receive the Outstanding AE Award from the Journal of Purchasing and Supply Management for my services to the journal. That was during the International Purchasing and Supply Chain Management Conference that happened in Rotterdam last month. So I was really pleased to receive this award for my service. A little bit about how my research evolved over the years. Interestingly, my PhD and early postdoc research focused on private sector settings. So my PhD was about how buyers and suppliers of B2B services interact during the contracting process to define the object of exchange, define what it is that they're exchanging, and how this exchange definition can change over the course of the contractual relationship and what the role of the formal contract is in managing buyer-supplier relationships. So I worked closely with providers of logistics and supply chain services and their blue chip customers to help them improve the way they contract for effective and efficient service delivery, which then influenced also my postdoc research and early career work as a lecturer when I focused on what we call outcome-based contracting or performance-based contracting. And I helped companies like Volvo and Tetra Pak to improve the way they contract for supply chain performance. Since my return at Lancaster, my work progressively shifted towards public sector contracting, initially in relation to promoting technological innovation to improve the delivery of public services, specifically healthcare and defense. So this stream of work involved collaboration and close engagement with Innovate UK, the National Innovation Agency, as well as the Ministry of Defence, the NHS, and the specific innovation intermediary organisations operating within the UK defence and healthcare sectors. Since 2020, largely due to a funded research project I brought to Lancaster, I added in my agenda the contracting for resilience theme, where the focus, the empirical context is pharmaceutical supply chains, and I will say a bit more about that. The project has involved close engagement and collaboration with NHS England and the Department of Health and Social Care. And more recently, since 2022, I've been researching how public contracting can promote social value and sustainability goals in supply chains, in engagement with the Bay Anchor Network and other organizations like the Morecambe Bay NHS Trust and Lancaster County Council. So this is in a nutshell how my research evolved, and I will say more about some of these themes in a bit. Of course, all of this research, all of these different streams of work involved collaborations with multiple scholars and good colleagues nationally and internationally. So I was counting the other day my number of co-authors, and I could count 66. By the way, that includes a very recent paper that I've been involved in, which is a kind of discipline review paper where, believe it or not, it has 93 co-authors. So I didn't include that. So I have to say that I'm not looking forward to logging in this paper when it gets published to my pure profile. So 66 co-authors, you can see some of them being pictured there. I have developed collaborating links with 38 universities in 15 different countries, and you can see some of the institutions in the slide. And it's really difficult to do justice to all of my collaborators given the time constraints that we have today. But I would like to single out one person, my good friend and colleague, long-standing colleague, Martin Spring. Martin has been a source of inspiration and excellent guidance and support throughout my career, from the very outset where he supervised my MSc dissertation and my PhD work. And Martin helped me to navigate the complexities and difficulties of developing an academic career. So it's been really, truly a pleasure working with Martin all those years. To be more precise, is about 23 years now. So thank you very much, Martin, for all that you have done for me. Here is Martin and I receiving a prestigious Best Paper Award from the US-based Journal of Supply Chain Management in August 2023. And this is for our work on SME supplier-enabled innovations in the supply chain of the NHS. So we're really pleased to have received this prestigious award. Okay, so that was a brief introduction about me, and now I will shift my attention talking a little bit about the three research themes that I mentioned earlier, so innovation, resilience, and sustainability and social value. So the first research stream I will talk about relates to innovation-oriented public contracting, and this links to Sustainable Development Goals number 3 and 9. This stream of work is based on several research projects funded by the British Academy for Humanities and Social Sciences, the Leverhulme Trust, and a 2015 LU PAM Prime, which is very useful, I have to say. The work was also supported by the Health Innovation Campus, specifically Glyn Jones and his team at HIC. And one of our projects also involved collaboration with Health Innovation North Coast Agency, formerly known as the Innovation Agency, which is an organization that seeks to support the development and adoption of health innovation in the NHS in our region. So this research theme is underpinned by extensive empirical research, approximately 100 interviews with managers of SME firms, NHS decision makers, policy makers, and other individuals, as well as extensive collection and analysis of secondary data sources, more than 200. So what is the problem or the challenge that we are dealing with in this domain? So the key problem here is the difficulty that the NHS has to adopt and embed into service delivery processes novel technologies. Innovation is imperative for the NHS to improve care, quality, and resource productivity against the backdrop of rising demand, staff shortages, and funding constraints that it faces. So specific technological solutions or novel technologies that we are relevant to mention here are medical tech, digital health applications, and remote care technologies. The latter two are especially important in efforts to keep people out of the hospital and therefore reduce capacity constraints in secondary care. And the interesting fact is that many of these novel technological solutions, especially digital health and remote care, are developed by technology-based SMEs, which have brilliant ideas, but usually face limitations in terms of their funding, connections, and capabilities and market reputation. So it is challenging for the NHS and these technology-based SMEs to collaborate and contract for innovation. And there are multiple reasons for that, but to summarize all of these reasons, part of it is due to institutional failures. So, for example, the NHS have very rigid NHS procurement rules and norms. It's risk averse. And partly there are capability limitations, both for the buying side, but also the SME suppliers. So, for example, the NHS has a limited ability to define its unmet needs and to identify and assess novel offerings that these SMEs are offering. The SMEs, on the other hand, they don't necessarily know how to navigate the complex NHS landscape and sell their solutions effectively. So my research focus has been on different policy interventions and specific policy programs designed to tackle these problems and improve collaborative innovation between the NHS and technology-based SMEs. So what I did, I assessed specific policy instruments and identified improvement opportunities. Here is an example from my empirical research. Polyphotonics is a technology-based SME which a few years back developed a quite revolutionary method for treating diabetic patients that have eyesight problems. So the solution here was a sleep mask, which potentially replaces the conventional treatment method, which is an injection into the eye of the patient, each injection costing the NHS about £1,000. As you can imagine, the estimated NHS cost savings are enormous. So different studies place them between 500 million to 1 billion per annum. Plus the mask, this novel product drastically improves patient experience and welfare because it removes the need for an injection into the eye. So it is very much, it's a very promising solution, a very promising product overall. Polyphotonics was able to develop this novel product thanks to 2 successive R&D contracts that were awarded to it through the SBRI healthcare program. The SBRI scheme, which was recently relabeled and is now called Contracts for Innovation, is the UK's pre-commercial procurement policy, which is championed by Innovate UK, which is the National Innovation Agency. So what this scheme does is that it awards contracts to small firms to fully fund R&D projects for developing innovative products and services that fulfill unmet public sector needs in different areas. The example I'm saying here is health related, but it could also be defense, sustainability, energy, any public sector setting is within scope here. But the larger user of this program is by far the NHS. So one of my studies focused on assessing this program and try to identify the effects that it has on technology-based SMEs. So overall, I found that the program offers many benefits to SMEs and the NHS because it kind of lifts some of the institutional constraints I mentioned earlier and incentivizes SME innovation activity. For example, these contracts are fully funded, so there's no requirement for SMEs to put any much funding into them. They also assign, and this is very important, assign the IP developed through this process to the SME rather than to the public sector customer, who retains licensing rights, however. And a lot of the SMEs that we talked to actually really like this scheme because they develop their technical capabilities, they get valuable product development feedback, but they also build their market reputation because of the so-called certification effect, the fact that they get a first customer being a large public organization such as the NHS helps for their commercialization activities. But this is only part of the story because although innovative SMEs like Polyphotonics benefit significantly from pre-commercial procurement policy programs, they still struggle to get their novel tech products adopted and diffused into the NHS subsequently. So this quotes hopefully illustrates some of the further institutional constraints and capacity issues that actually act as barriers for the NHS to make full use of such wonderful innovations. So there are issues around how slow-moving decisions are within the NHS, the risk aversion mentality within the NHS, and other things that can actually hurt these small firms' cash flow and product commercialization progress. Overall, we talked to over 40 technology-based SMEs. We also talked to NHS procurement professionals and other decision makers within NHS hospitals. So we identified a series of innovation adoption and diffusion barriers. For example, one of the big ones is that there is a disconnect between pre-commercial procurement policy programs and the NHS's commercial procurement rules, so that the SBRI-funded innovations can be embedded later on into service delivery processes of hospitals, for example. The other example of a barrier is the pervasive use of framework contracts within the NHS, which have very stringent requirements. For example, they require that suppliers have track record, and some of these young, small SMEs do not have track records, basically. So the effect is that these young, wonderful, small firms are often locked out for a considerable time period, and therefore they have challenges with regard to commercialization and revenue generation. SMEs also face limitations in terms of their ability to connect to NHS decision makers, and they don't necessarily have the resources to sell to a decentralized and slow-moving NHS. So they are facing cash flow issues. So some examples of barriers that we identified. So to tackle some of these additional problems, the UK government back in 2013 established regional health innovation agencies with a mission to promote innovation in the NHS at pace and scale. These were originally called academic health science networks, and they were recently renamed as health innovation networks. And there are about 15 regional agencies across England. Health innovation networks place a lot of emphasis on the support of technology-based SMEs, and in fact, most of them have dedicated programs for support for SMEs. where the aim is to connect these SMEs to NHS organizations and to facilitate collaborative innovation between these two, between the buyer and the supplier, so to speak. So one of my studies was about studying extensively the Health Innovation Northwest Coast's SME support program called Business Connect to see how well it works. So we identified multiple ways in which the innovation in the intermediaries, so we call health innovation networks innovation intermediaries, how this intermediary organization seeks to support collaborative innovation in the context of NHS. We identified several effects like improved connectivity for these SMEs within the NHS. These intermediary organizations play a very important role in terms of helping the assessment and evidence generation that is needed for these SMEs to prove that they have a promising technology to offer to the NHS. The SMEs are also being educated and guided by health innovation networks and also the people that work for these innovation networks, because they know the procurement problems that the SMEs are facing. They're advocating for change in procurement rules and norms to make them more SME friendly. I also studied similar innovation intermediation policies and structure in the context of the UK Defence, so the Ministry of Defence. Specifically, I studied how for-profit intermediary called Nightworks was tasked with promoting technological innovation in defense and security domains by connecting the MOD as a buyer with many innovative suppliers. And we did that because we saw that there were very similar institutional capability challenges in both sectors. So overall, my research has shown that these innovation intermediaries play an important role in promoting collaborative innovation in the supply chains of the NHS and the MOD by, one, seeking to promote institutional change, for example, shaping new rules and norms for faster procurement and integration of these novel technologies, and two, by compensating for capability shortfalls of both buyers and suppliers firms. For example, these intermediaries have a particularly important role to play in helping to assess and de-risk novel technologies, thereby improving the adoption rate at the end of the day. So through our work, we also demonstrated the positive impacts of intermediation policies in the supply chains of the NHS and the MOD, mainly in terms of increased SME collaboration, as measured by the number of collaborative innovation projects, and also positive effects on innovation adoption, as measured by how many solutions were actually being bought and embedded into the service delivery systems of the NHS and the MOD. Some related research outputs from this stream of work are shown in this slide. Some highlights are two publications, two FT-listed publications in the Journal of Operations Management and Research Policy, and a third one that I have already mentioned that got a Best Paper Award in the Journal of Supply Chain Management. It was truly an honor to be invited by the MOD to give a lecture on innovation-oriented procurement. And I also consulted in previous years Innovate UK and the Canadian federal government on pre-commercial procurement policies. Back in 2017, we also ran a Work Foundation hosted event which focused on the SBRI, the UK SBRI, and that was attended by senior policymakers and some high-profile people. In fact, the architect of the SBRI gave a talk during this event, so it was a very successful event. Okay, so moving on now to the second research stream I would like to talk about, and this is about, this relates to resilience-oriented public contracting linking to Sustainable Development Goal 3, and the context here being pharmaceutical supply chains. This is based on an international project called MIA, which the acronym stands for Measures for Improved Availability of Medicines and Vaccines, which was funded by the Research Council of Norway. So that was an international project where Lancaster was a partner in, alongside BI Oslo, INSEAD, RSM, and the Norwegian Institute of Public Health. The project focused on identifying and evidencing cost-effective interventions to improve the availability of medicines and vaccines. My colleague Nuni Dube was also heavily involved in the project, was a co-I and worked with me in this project. The UK part of the research involved close engagement with the Department of Health and Social Care, specifically the medicine supply branch of the department, as well as the Medicine and Value Access Directorate within NHS England, and an agency called Medicines Procurement and Supply Chain. So it was really really engaged research. So what I'm going to talk about is underpinned by, again, extensive empirical research, both in the UK and abroad. Basically, in this project, we combined qualitative and quantitative methodological approaches to derive our findings and conclusions. So the problem that the real world problem that we are dealing in this project and the context in which we investigate the role of contracting in promoting supply chain resilience is shortage of medicines. This is a significant, internationally relevant and persisting problem with negative consequences not only on patient welfare, but also on care costs. Because when you have medicine shortages, this can also lead to postponing or canceling treatment sessions. Therefore, this needs to be rescheduled. And also healthcare professionals and pharmacists spend a lot of time and effort in trying to secure alternative products when the specific medicine goes short. So the care costs are actually quite high linked to shortages. So the widely recognized solution to this problem is to build more resilient pharmaceutical supply chains. And to this effect, there have been a number of policy initiatives internationally and a lot of expert reports recommending strategies to increase resilience in medicine supply chains. For example, the European Commission has recently established the Critical Medicines Alliance, and the EMA, which is the regulator, published a list of active molecules that are deemed critical. And for a subset of these molecules, HERA, which is the Healthcare Emergency Response Agency of the European Union, is currently conducting supply chain vulnerability analysis to see what is the supply risk. In the UK, the latest report from the Royal Pharmaceutical Society calls for the UK government to develop a national medicine supply chain resilience strategy, including through changing the way the NHS buys medicines to incentivize suppliers to become more resilient. But even way before the publication of this latest RPS report, the Department of Health and Social Care has been working on a suite of measures to boost supply chain resilience, mainly in response to COVID, but also the lessons learned from Brexit. So as you can see in this slide, these measures cover different areas, from establishing an essential medicines list to stockpiling medicines to considering domestic manufacturing for some of the molecules to rethinking the way logistics and transport is organized. Importantly, one of the initiative areas has been procurement in secondary care. So this is a call for action to actually reform NHS tendering and contracting practices to prioritize supply chain resilience, specifically in the hospital care setting. So this has been the focus of our empirical study mainly, although there are crossovers and interrelationships with other areas, for example, stockpiling and regulatory flexibilities. So the research we have done identified multiple challenges and tensions that are involved in transitioning from what is traditionally a very cost-focused, price-focused medicine procurement system to one that places greater emphasis on supply chain resilience. So specific issues were identified, for example, is that believe it or not, when they select suppliers, there is no resilience criteria that are being taken into account. It's all about price. There are also weak incentives for suppliers to invest in resilience in their upstream supply chains. Again, framework contracts are a big problem because they guarantee no purchases and they guarantee no volumes. So that kind of there's no commitment from the perspective of the buyer here towards the supplier. The NHS also requires all manufacturers of medicines that sell in the UK market to have 8 weeks of buffer stocks for drugs, but we found that this actually doesn't work very well as a measure. So as part of our engaged research and close dialogue with both the Department of Health and NHS England, as well as pharmaceutical industry associations, we have sought to inform current policy interventions that are being designed. So one of the areas that we have advocated for is more emphasis on upfront rigorous assessment of suppliers, with explicit resilience criteria being added in supplier selection processes, which can reduce supply issues and failure cost post-contract. Another interesting approach is what we call value-based procurement approach, where the focus should be more on positively rewarding resilient suppliers, for example, by accepting some minor price increases, which can be offset by reducing significantly the costs of failure. And by cost of failure, I mean the cost of dealing with actual shortages as they happen. And we also call for, because the current resilience strategy of the NHS is all about redundant stock and redundant suppliers through multiple sourcing. And we think that this needs to be rebalanced, this mix needs to be rebalanced to increase supply flexibility. For example, by adopting agile sourcing principles, where these principles allow for the fast market re-entry of suppliers with dormant capacities and dormant licensing, dormant manufacturing capacities to re-enter the market as and when required, so more supply flexibility. As part of the MIA project, we were also commissioned by NHS England and the Department of Health to conduct a study and write a report on supply chain data information sharing practices internationally as a tool that could potentially mitigate and even prevent medicine shortages. This issue was also raised in the latest Royal Society report, Royal Pharmaceutical Society report, which called for an examination of best practices internationally regarding supply chain data sharing, and also the use of AI and data analytics to develop what they call early warning systems, which the idea is that these early warning systems help to detect early and even prevent supply issues and shortages. So when I say supply chain data here, I mean that, well, the NHS and Department of Health would like manufacturers to share data on product sales, stock levels, stock flows, where is stock located, and so on and so forth, so that they can then use this information to make informed decisions about supply risk management. So we were asked by the Medicine Value and Access Directorate and the Department of Health to study this issue, and we conducted a study in 7 different countries. You can see the countries there in the slide. And we also incorporated insights from relevant initiatives in the European Union and the US, and assessed all this information against the UK situation. So very briefly, our recommendations with regard to this piece of work was 4 recommendations. The first one was to really improve the capacity of the NHS to and suppliers to share data in real time, which is a big issue. For example, by investing in automated systems that speak to each other, and also by solving data integration and connectivity issues. The second recommendation was around strengthening the governance of data sharing so that suppliers know what to expect. The third one was about investing in data analytics, enabled anticipation and prevention capabilities internally. And when I say internally, I mean within ministries or within regulatory bodies that are being involved, including the use of AI-enabled systems. And of course, that goes beyond systems because you also need to develop people and to develop the right structures and processes to have in place. And number 4 was the need to define specific use cases for data sharing and also assess the cost effectiveness of this measure. The idea here being that data sharing can be a useful tool, but perhaps its use should be restricted to only specific types of drugs. So it's not necessarily a blanket measure that would be beneficial to have for all types of drugs. In relation to this stream of work, these are some of the outputs generated. One FT-listed article already published in the Journal of Operations Management, with 2 more being in preparation. I also gave an invited presentation to an audience of the Department of Health and NHS England in relation to the Commission study that I mentioned before. And we are continuing the engagement with these organizations. For example, I've been invited very recently to provide inputs to their forthcoming external consultation for their work on supply chain resilience. So we are looking forward to continue this engagement. We have also engaged with the Royal Pharmaceutical Society, which is an important stakeholder in this domain. And last November, we organized an event in their premises in London, and Noni and I were involved in that. The third and last research theme that I would like to briefly talk about relates to social value and sustainability-oriented contracting, and this links to at least 2 SDGs that you see there on the slide. This is partly based on engagement with the Bay Anchor Network, formerly called the Morecambe Bay Anchor Collaborative, which is a network of anchor institutions in our region which seeks to create social value and generate local community benefits. This stream of work is also supported by the Pentland Center, and it involves collaboration with a procurement unit of the university and their work on sustainable sourcing. And I would also like to acknowledge here the support we have received from Stephen King. He has helped us to make many connections. So as previously, this work is underpinned by empirical research, but it's fair to say that compared to the previous 2 themes, this is the least mature research stream at the moment. The background to this research that we are doing is that anchor institutions can be local councils, hospitals, universities, large firms rooted in a locality, are seen as powerful engines for generating local community benefits and creating social value. Now, the definition of social value is very broad, so it can include all sorts of things like, for example, decent working conditions, fair pay, inclusion, both within the workplace and outside the workplace, generating training and employment opportunities for local people, supporting the growth of local SMEs and protecting the environment, for example, reducing emissions. So some of these trends have been accelerated through relevant regulations that apply in the UK. So, for example, the UK since 2013 has the Social Value Act, and more recently, NHS England has mandated for embedding net zero and social value requirements in all tenders and procurement contracts for goods and services. So then suppliers need to comply with these social value requirements. So our research focus has been on the role of procurement again. So as one of the levers that anchor institutions have to create social value, other levers that they have is that they are large employers in the locality, or that they have several buildings and infrastructure that they can use. So the specific issue here is that anchors, most of the anchors that we've spoken to have social value statements and policies in place, but it is unclear how these then get translated into social value focused procurement strategies and practices. So we investigated this issue by studying 17 anchor institutions, 10 metropolitan councils, and 7 NHS trusts up and down the country. And this framework here sums up our key findings. Basically, we identified 5 key dimensions: strategy, practices, performance management, skills, structure. And for each one of these dimensions, we generated detailed insights regarding social value procurement. So, for example, when it comes to strategy, anchor institutions need to become better in translating abstract triple bottom line dimensions into more specific social value themes and outcomes that befit their place-based needs and priorities. In terms of practices, many organizations that we talk to actually nowadays embed social value criteria when they select suppliers, but they need to have a much more customized approach when it comes to the weighting of these social value criteria. Specifically, they might have to consider the spend category and the contract value to create more targeted effects. And when it comes to skills, there is a lot of emphasis on educating and upskilling procurement professionals within local councils or hospitals, but there is a lot less emphasis on educating and upskilling and supporting supplier firms, especially SME supplier firms, which they don't necessarily understand what social value is, and they don't necessarily know how to respond to tenders with social value requirements, and also how to create social value after they awarded a contract. As part of this research stream, I'm also working closely with Larissa Morris and her team within the procurement unit of the university to set up student projects that are basically designed to support the university's work on sustainable sourcing. So the past 3 years, we have placed 17 students in 6 different research projects, focusing on some of the themes that you see on the slide. So, for example, scope 3 emissions, supplier engagement in sustainability activities, and assessing and monitoring supplier performance when it comes to sustainability, both environmental sustainability, but also social aspects and things like, for example, making sure that there is no modern slavery in the supply chain of the university, basically. Again, some highlights in terms of research outputs. I have to say that the engagement with the Bay Anchor Network is ongoing, and I'm also a member of the Purchasing and Commissioning Working Group of the Anchor Network, and I have offered many inputs regarding the development of the network's social value procurement policy and strategy. I have also supervised many short-term collaborative research projects with organizations like the Morecambe Bay Hospital Trust and Lancaster County Council, as well as the procurement unit of the university. But this is still a work in progress. We're still working on designing more research in this area. So now I'm reaching towards the end of my presentation, and I'm well aware that some of you might be wondering, so what is the bigger message or bigger picture here? So I guess for me, one of the broader messages for academics, but also for practitioners and policymakers potentially, is that we need to think harder about the relationship between supply chain management and public policy. And I would also say the interplay, not only the relationship, but the interplay between these two things. A lot of the research that has been done out there, including some of my research, have sought to identify and assess the effects of public policies on supply chains in areas such as health. But at the same time, I think it's very important to figure out the reverse relationship. So how supply chain management research, knowledge, and best practice can be used to design better policies, to help implement these policies, and to even help evaluate these policies. This, by the way, is not restricted only to the areas that I've talked about, so health or innovation policy or industrial policy, but it potentially has relevance for other areas. A very recent example is trade policy. Trade policy should be informed by supply chain management knowledge, I think. Other areas include climate change policies, modern slavery that some of my colleagues, for example, Mark Stevenson and Linda Henry are working on modern slavery topics. So I think this is a much more generic message that I would like to share with you during this presentation. Moving forward, my plan is to continue building on at least some of the research themes that I talked about today. For example, I was very recently awarded a UKRI Innovation Research Caucus grant together with colleagues from the University of Manchester Institute of Innovation Research to study the impacts of innovation policy on UK supply chains. And the interesting thing there is that we're trying also to figure out what is the relationship between innovation and supply chain resilience. There are also plans in the making to develop additional grant proposals, for example, following on our medicine supply chain project, and also on sustainability-oriented procurement. There is also a plan to continue engaging with the Department of Health and NHS as part of our work on medicine supply chains. The hope being that this can lead to some form of policy impact in the near future. Well, let's see about that. And finally, one of the things that I really enjoy doing is I really enjoy using my research to inform my teaching and capacity building activities as relates to PhD supervision, MSc student teaching, teaching executives, for example, through the Cyber Executives MBA, and also finding opportunities to engage more and to educate SMEs. For example, my good colleague Andy Schroeder recently was recently awarded an Impact Accelerator account grant, where the focus is on teaching manufacturing SMEs on the benefits of servitizing their business models, and I'm involved in that as well. So as part of that, there might be also some supply chain and procurement management aspects to be had. So that was my last slide, and thank you very much for your attention. I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Kostas. That was really fantastic and really great to see the evolution of your work to all those different contexts. We're now inviting audience members to either ask questions. You can either raise your hand to ask a question, or if you have any comments to make in the chat. Stefanos.
Thank you, Maria. Of course, it's very fascinating work, empirically very rich, and you demonstrate this in these three areas in a very eloquent way. I would like to hear something more about the intellectual lens that you are developing in addressing these problems, because you haven't talked about the theoretical perspective of your work. Everything on the empirics are fine and addressing the policy challenges and the specific problems. But what about the theoretical school that you are presenting? What is your theoretical aim?
Yeah, thanks, Stefanos, for the kind comments and for the question. Yeah, that's as I said at the beginning, I chose not to go there because, thinking about the audience. But some of the theories that I have used during my research come from economics, transaction cost economics, agency theory, property rights theory, as the usual suspects that relate to contracting, for example. But also increasingly moving beyond grant theory and using grant theory applications, trying to actually, how to say that, start with a real world problem as opposed to starting with a theory, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. And may I ask, if you move towards the grant theory and more problem oriented, are you consolidating in one particular area more? Are you more on transaction costs? Are you more on agency? You look more on the relational perspective. There must be an area that consolidates the area that you're professing. Yeah?
My view on this is that professors shouldn't necessarily be focusing on certain theories, but more like trying to solve real world problems. And then when it comes to writing papers, of course, you have to relate to all sorts of literature bodies and maybe some grant theories, but I wouldn't start from there. That's how I changed my view over the years, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Stefanos. Thank you, Kostas. Are there any other questions? Oh, I think Stefanos, your hand's up still, but is anybody else got any questions?
No, Maria is fine with me.
Okay, thank you. I think the burning question for everybody is how do you manage with 93 co-authors on that piece that you mentioned earlier? But one of the things that is very impressive about your work, Kostas, which we talk about a lot, is this engaged scholarship, and it is where the problem comes from, and that virtuous cycle of engagement with the real world problem leading to these really deep interrogation of these problems that then leads to the fantastic publications, etc. And one of the things I was interested in, we talked about it a little, was, when you take back these findings to your collaborators, to the how does that stage work? Can you tell us a little bit about that when you go back to the NHS or the other organisations you've worked with, in terms of how are they working with the findings that you've come up with?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very good question, and this is actually one of the things that I'm struggling with, and other people are struggling with, because if you are working with large public sector organizations and policymakers, it's not necessarily the case that they would, how to say this politely, they will listen to what you have to say, but they will not necessarily take action. So it's a slow process in convincing them to do something about, and even though they see the relevance and they see why this is important, this translating what you say to them into action is not, it's something I'm struggling with, I have to say. So in our interactions with the Department of Health and NHS England, this has been a struggle, to be honest. But they appreciate and they listen carefully to what we have presented and written to them. So hopefully there will be some sort of impact in the future.
Yeah, no, thanks. I recognise that. Yeah. Okay, is there any other comments or questions? I know we're nearing 5 o'clock. I want to say thank you again, Kostas, for that presentation. And I also have something you can't see with my stupid background, but I have got an award to give you, just a recognition of this. But I think just in the time-honoured way, I'd like to just say thank you. If people can use their icons to thank you. And, we did really enjoy listening to you. Sam, I think actually with the clapping, I won't ask anybody else to speak. But thank you so much, Kostas. Thank you, everybody, for coming today.